Yay! Saturday always brings a new crowd, so we're so excited to have you guys. Chocolate tempering has been something that we are very adamant about doing every single year. And I'm always grateful for the reminder of how to properly melt our chocolate. And who better than our dear friend Rebecca to teach us how to do this. Rebecca has been a huge part of our chocolate events for many, many years, and helping to kind of just redesign the chocolate world here in Utah. She came to us from the east with, if you guys are familiar with the Mono chocolate, they brought her here to kind of be their pastry chef and help to use their chocolates in a lot of different ways. And then we snagged her for classes. We're like, great, you do this, can we have you too? We've been blessed to have her join us for a lot of things. But she's kind of been able to float around and just help educate and get really delicious treats in our bellies throughout the valley. And she's been at Lakai. You were at Park City Cooking School for a while. Right now, she's currently, I was just listening, she's with a private corporation feeding their employees, and I think, man, I want to go work there. Because she's cooking to them. They're eating very, very well. But Rebecca may be the most modest pastry chef that I've ever met, with some of the highest accolades. She makes things so obtainable and so doable, which I think if you guys are like me, sometimes you get into this pastry world and you see these things and you're like, too many steps, too many things, is this really what I need to do? And Rebecca is like the best friend that you want to just take home with you, and you're like, great, we're gonna do this together, and she's gonna make it so doable. So if you guys have struggled with chocolate tempering, she's gonna show you 2 different ways that you can do it today. If you're coming and you're like, great, I just need a new reminder of how to do it, you'll be able to get some really great insight. But Rebecca is just charming as she is knowledgeable, so we love having her here. This is what I mean.
Doc, you makes me blush.
No, we absolutely love Rebecca, and when she comes in, she just has a smile on her face, and it's like, let's just teach people today, which just speaks to my soul. So we're glad you're here, and we get her for the chocolate events, and I'm like, can I have you every week? But she has her other job too. So, but we're just happy to have you here and sharing your chocolate tempering wisdom with us.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for always making me feel like part of the Geedy family.
You're always here, so thank you.
All right. Okay. Chocolate tempering. How many of us have attempted? Everybody in here has tried to temper chocolate before? Okay, so everybody's more or less familiar with terminology and the temperature and the process, right? You look at it on paper, and it seems pretty simple, right? No? I mean, okay. Well, when you look and you say, okay, I need to melt my chocolate and heat it up. That's not hard. Okay, then I need to bring the temperature down. Okay, I can do that. But it's so much more than just following a temperature range, right? It's actually creating crystals within that chocolate in order to create that glossy, sheen, that finished product that's going to snap when you break it. Why do we have to temper chocolate? Why do we have to do it? Or when do we have to do it? Right. I mean, so do I have to temper chocolate if I'm making brownies? No. Do I have to temper chocolate if I'm making a ganache? No. When do I have to temper it? Yeah, for molding or for other decorative uses. Okay, so if I want to dip strawberries or dip pretzels or anything along those lines, or make chocolate shavings, my chocolate does have to be tempered. We're using Guittard chocolate today. It doesn't give me a percentage. Heather says it's maybe about a 62, which is fairly, it's on that borderline between semi-sweet and bittersweet. And it says that it has a French vanilla flavor. And it also has a word that's kind of highlighted right at the top of this label. And can anybody on that front row see what it is? It says couverture. So couverture, people are becoming more and more aware of couverture and why it may be more desirable for molding and things like this as opposed to just any old chocolate. And what couverture indicates is that this chocolate has a higher percentage of cocoa butter in it than your run-of-the-mill chocolate. Certain chocolates are manufactured for certain uses, if I'm making chocolate chip cookies, I don't necessarily want to use a couverture. It maybe is going to taste delicious, but it's going to melt more in my cookies, and it may actually cause my cookies to flatten out more because that chocolate won't hold its shape. For chocolate chips, if you've ever melted chocolate chips, how many have melted chocolate chips before? All right, and what's that chocolate like when it's melted? It's really thick, isn't it? Really thick and maybe a little gummy. Those chocolate chips are manufactured with far less cocoa butter, so that those chips are going to be more likely to hold their shape when you bake with them. So there's a really vast difference within, from chocolate to chocolate, what its actual makeup is. So you do want one for decorating purposes. You do want to use a couverture because it is going to allow you to get a thinner shell in your chocolates, or a nicer coating on your strawberries. If you try to do a non-couverture, it's going to be, especially if you're molding, you're going to have a hard time tapping out all the excess because it is going to be so thick. All right, so let's see. So I brought a couple of visual aids, all right, just while our chocolate finishes melting over here. I'm melting the chocolate over a water bath, okay? It's kind of a do-it-yourself double boiler, right? There's different ways you can melt chocolates, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but right now we're just using some hot water. This was really hot, almost boiling. I turned it down to a simmer. The chocolate was almost melted, so I've turned the flame off, and I'm just gonna let the last few bits of chocolate just melt, from that carryover heat. All right, so if your chocolate's not tempered, what happens after a while? This is a pretty extreme example, all right? Can you see how nasty that looks? This has also been hanging around for probably a couple of years, all right? And so these crystals have really had a chance to, really take over the landscape here. But this is kind of one example of what can happen if your chocolate is not tempered or not tempered properly, all right? What do we know about cocoa butter crystals?
Nothing.
Okay, all right. That's a good place to start. That's a good place to start, all right? Do we know what cocoa butter is? We've all heard of cocoa butter, but do we have a visual, a mental image? So cocoa butter is the end process of chocolate, melted chocolate, in its state before anything else has been added to it. So in its unsweetened state, all right? That chocolate is put through a hydraulic press to extract a portion of the cocoa butter. And then what's left over after that is pulverized, and it becomes cocoa powder, all right? So you can think of chocolate as a kind of a combination of two different components: a liquid component, which is the melted cocoa butter, and then a solid component, which is the little solid particles, which is really the equivalent of cocoa powder. Okay, does that make a little bit of sense? And so cocoa butter, I have a little cocoa butter here. I don't know if you're interested in seeing it up close. This is solidified cocoa butter, all right? And cocoa butter is a really unique type of a fat. Besides chocolate, in this scenario, where else do we see cocoa butter used a lot?
Cosmetics.
In cosmetics, right? Lotions and sunscreens and things like things of that nature, lip balms and things like that. But it's a really interesting fat. Do you guys want to see this up close? I don't know. Do you want to maybe pass that? Cocoa butter is unique in that it's the only fat that really doesn't ever go rancid, okay? Any of your oils, your liquid fats like that, they'll go rancid over time, or, shortenings and things of that nature. But cocoa butter really doesn't go rancid. When it solidifies, it's extremely hard. And cocoa butter is the whole reason that we have to temper chocolate, okay? Now, any chocolate that you purchase left the factory in a tempered state, okay? You can't really buy untempered chocolate. And even if it looks a little messed up, okay, because some of this chocolate is shipped in big bags and repackaged, and so it gets, little surface blemishes. But chocolate that's in a good temper, let's see if we can hear it snap when I try to break it. Okay, You hear that way back there? All right. So that tells me that this chocolate is in a good temper, even though it has these, just surface cosmetic blemishes. All right. So left to its own devices. No, let's back up one step. So I buy the chocolate and it is in temper. But in order to be able to use it for molding or dipping, I have to melt it, right, and put it into a liquid state. But as I melt that chocolate, those cocoa butter crystals are going to dissolve, okay? They're going to melt out. And left to their own devices, if I don't retemper that chocolate, that cocoa butter will recrystallize, but it'll recrystallize in a random fashion, okay? And at the moment we know of 6 crystal formations that have been named. And they used to be called alpha, beta, gamma, but now we just call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And only one of those crystal formations is stable at room temperature. And that, actually 2 of them are, and those are 5 and 6, okay? We are, through the tempering process, recreating crystal number 5, okay? Crystal number 6 kind of forms on its own over time as tempered chocolate ages, okay? So if I have this hanging around in my pantry or my freezer, if I want to store chocolate for a long time, I'll store it in the freezer, okay? Storing it at room temperature, any idea how long it will last and still be good? Somebody said a year? 5 years, 10 years, okay, sure, or it may absorb, a funky flavor. But older chocolate will seem harder, and that's because those Form 5 crystals have kind of morphed on their own into a Form 6 crystal. But anyway, so it's the Form 5 that we're trying to recreate, all right? So I couldn't begin to tell you what forms these are, but they're definitely not Form 5, okay? Questions up till this point? Yes.
So if it goes to a Form 6, can you bring it back down? Like, can you melt it and then bring it back
Absolutely,
to a 5?
absolutely, yeah. Any of this chocolate like this, right? I mean, right? This is kind of scary if I see this. I think, oh my gosh, what can I do here? But this is actually reusable. Okay, I can melt it down and put it in my brownies. I can melt it down and make a ganache. I can retemper it and mold my chocolates with it. Okay, so even though it looks scary, it's just unfriendly crystals that have kind of taken over the party. And so you need to disinvite them and then recreate, turn them into, right, a friendlier crystal.
Is that same sign for the number 5 crystal applied to every chocolate, like ruby and things like that?
Yes, that applies across the board, whether you've got white chocolate, milk chocolate, the ruby chocolate like you mentioned, or the dark chocolates. Now, the temperatures involved in the tempering process are going to be slightly different for different chocolates. The dark chocolate involves using a higher, slightly higher melting point, a slightly higher cooling point. Any chocolate that's not dark, okay, so milk, white, ruby, those are going to go about 5 to 10 degrees lower than the temperatures for dark chocolate. Okay. All right. Okay. So, once upon a time, I found myself in France at a school, and there were 4 colleagues from the United States. We were there with a bunch of, it was really a weird situation. We were 4 pastry chefs from the States and a bunch of sales reps for this particular company from the UK and from France. And so anyway, it was kind of a fun and crazy week getting to sample lots of new products and learn new things. And one thing that happened was we walked into the kitchen on day 1, ready to do all these, chocolate demos and things, and there were no stoves inside. And we're going, that's weird. And we said, well, how are we gonna melt the chocolate? And so what happened was, when the instructor came in, I learned something that kind of blew me away. We all know we can melt chocolate in a microwave, right? As well as over a water bath. Did you know that you can melt? Did you know that stainless steel bowls can go in the microwave? Yeah, stainless steel bowls can go in the microwave. Before you get too excited, all right? Make sure it is stainless, all right? Right now, aluminum. I think this is stainless. No, you be sure, otherwise your microwave is toast. And then also make sure that you don't allow any part of the bowl to touch any of the walls. because you'll spark a, Anyway, so you can go in the microwave, okay? Eat right, cool, right? Anyway, new fun facts, okay? If you are how many of you use the microwave to melt your chocolate? A couple of us, okay. So, totally possible. I love melting chocolate in the microwave, but what do you have to really be careful about? You really have to be careful about heating it too much too fast, because you will burn it, and then you'll be so sad, okay? Because not only does it stink and it's hard to clean up, you've ruined, some valuable good chocolate isn't cheap, right? So low and slow. Here's another myth that I always like to try to dispel. A lot of times you'll be reading a recipe and it'll say, okay, melt your chocolate over a double boiler, just simmering water. And it'll say, don't let your bowl touch the water. You guys ever hear that? Mm-hmm. Okay, and you immediately panic and... Yeah. Okay, well, guess what? Guess what? It's perfectly fine for your bowl to touch the water. Perfectly fine. Okay? Because it's not water that ruins your chocolate, it's heat. Okay? Now, there is one reason why this is a little dangerous. And maybe that's the bigger... Huh? Yeah, if you get moisture into the chocolate, that can make it seize. Okay, so you do have to be careful, right? And if I'm melting, in a water bath like this, every time I take the bowl out, be sure to wipe the bottom so that I don't drip water into whatever it is I'm doing or onto my work surface, which I clearly just did, okay? At any rate, I just wanted you to be aware that there's more than one way to melt your bowl of chocolate. Okay, yes?
If you're doing a large amount of chocolate, can you just put it in the oven? Is that
If your oven has a low enough setting,
okay?
you absolutely can do it in the oven.
What's the low setting? Like 200 degrees?
Yeah, if I could go a tiny bit lower, I'd go,
170?
yeah, 170, 180, 190. Mine does 200. And I have done that before. A big bowl of chocolate in my oven overnight, or, for several hours. My microwave, too. My microwave, which sorry, I won't get into it. I hate microwaves above the stove. Okay, I hate that because, anyway. But mine has a light, right? And so if I turn my light on that shines down onto my cooktop, right, and put a bowl of chocolate in there overnight, it's warm enough to melt that chocolate overnight. Yeah, so, right? You may find unconventional ways to facilitate what it is you're after, So when I was in this kitchen in France, right, we used the microwave to melt our chocolate, and we used heat guns to melt the chocolate. Okay, so another unconventional method. Okay. Any other questions up till this point? Okay. So let's jump into the tempering portion, shall we? All right. First of all, we need to check to see where we're at. Hopefully we're going to be at an appropriate temperature to start. I've got not a heat gun, an infrared thermometer, and I've also got a probe thermometer. These are both the ThermoWorks brand, a really reliable, top quality brand if you're looking for a new product. Advantages to either one of these that we know about? Advantages, disadvantages? Okay, they both? What's that?
In the chocolate, out of the chocolate?
Yeah, in the chocolate and out of the chocolate. This you're going to have a little bit of a mess to wipe off and deal with. This one, you feel like ooh, I'm so cool here. This one, the disadvantage of this one is that it only reads the surface temperature. So if you want to get an accurate reading, what you've got to do is, or what I recommend doing, is stir as you take the temperature, okay? So that you're, creating a really uniform mixture throughout. All right, so what temperature might I be shooting for here? It's dark chocolate, yes. And I'm just going to say this right now. For couverture, for me, this is a little on the thick side. But every chocolate is different. Every chocolate has a little bit different personality. And so when you are learning to temper chocolate, I would recommend that you stick with one brand, one flavor, one percentage, until you feel like you have it more or less mastered. Because as soon as you switch to another chocolate, it may behave a little bit differently. And so if you are adding that complication into the mix when you're trying to, you know, perfect your skills, that may create some additional difficulty, right, and some additional confusion. All right, so if I'm tempering a dark chocolate, I want to go to about 120 degrees, okay? And now, is that a hard and fast rule? A lot of places will tell you heat it 110 to 120. And already you're having to make a decision, okay, with a process that maybe is a little bit intimidating. Anyway, so it's suggested that if you are starting with a chocolate that is 100% in a good temper, then heating it to 110 is totally sufficient, because you've got those nice form 5 crystals, and you know that they're all going to melt out by 110 degrees. If I'm starting with something that's fairly frightening like this, okay, I definitely want to take it to 120, because I've got all manner, you know, this combination of these unfriendly crystals, and I want to make good and sure that they have all melted out. Another thing, if I've got really questionable chocolate like this, is that I will heat that chocolate, or I'll hold it, you know, maybe overnight, or, you know, for a couple of hours. Some people may suggest 24 hours to make sure that all these are melted out, so that they're not going to cause any problems during that tempering process. Okay.
Can I ask a question about the blob?
Yes, of course.
I have one of those in my freezer.
Uh-huh.
Would I take it out and let it thaw first?
Yes. Let it thaw first. Keep it wrapped.
Yeah.
Let it defrost 24 hours, and then go ahead and use it. Anybody want to see this up close? Do you care? This keep him out of it. That's yeah, we know him, right? You first, and then you.
So what happens when your chocolate goes above 120?
Thank you for asking that question. Thank you for asking that question.
128 or something, is it, what do you do?
Okay, so she said, what do you do if your chocolate goes above 120? All right. Do I call the fire department? No. And you know what? My chocolate is, oh, now I've changed it to, he's jumping all over the place, because he was at about 129. Now, just while we're talking, he's just sitting here. He's already, you know what, this thermometer, I think it was me. I think I wasn't holding it in the same spot. He's about 126. Do I worry? Do I panic? No. Because you know what? Your chocolate's probably fine. Your chocolate's probably fine at 130. It's probably fine at 140. It's probably fine at 150. Okay? I don't really know the exact temperature that chocolate scorches or burns. And in fact, one time I got my chocolate so hot that it actually separated. The cocoa butter came out of it. And that was a little bit scary to see it, but I thought, you know what? It makes sense that it would come back together as those crystals reform, and sure enough, I was able to retemper that. All right, so it's not, there's no damage to your chocolate if it goes, you know, a few degrees over 120 or even several degrees over 120. But what it does mean is that it's going to take longer to cool down, okay? And so that may affect how much seed you need to add, or it may affect how much time you need to spend on your flat surface doing a table temper. Okay? You had a question.
Semi-sweet.
Because there's really nothing in it to go bad, all right? We already know the fat really doesn't go rancid. The worst thing that would happen if it's not wrapped properly, it may absorb moisture.
Is it gonna be between dark and milk?
No, semi-sweet is a dark chocolate.
It's a dark chocolate.
Yeah, semi-sweet is a dark chocolate. So anything that doesn't have, so milk chocolate, white chocolate, ruby chocolate, anything that has milk powder in it is going to be one of your lower temperatures. So milk chocolate has milk powder, white chocolate has milk powder, ruby chocolate has who knows what that has in it. Okay. But those are all, do you like ruby chocolate? I was expecting, for all the hype surrounding it when it came out, I was expecting more. You know, it's fun, right? And it's beautiful, but sometimes you're trying to cook with it or make a ganache, it kind of goes gray, and then you have to, anyway, I don't know. But that's a great question. Okay. Any other questions up to this point? Okay. So I've melted, I don't know how much this is, a couple pounds, maybe pound and a half. Seeding. All right. How many use a seeding method? Okay. What method do the rest of you try? We don't know.
We just melt and we just do it. We don't know what we're doing.
Okay, cool. Okay. So if all you want to do is melt and dip, is there a product you can use? Do you have?
Yeah, chocolate.
No, not chocolate. You can buy a product that goes by some different names. Candy melts, compound coating, summer coating, okay? That looks just like chocolate, all right? Looks just like it. It doesn't cost the same as good chocolate. And if you read the label, what gives me a clue on the label that this is my real, we'll call it real chocolate? It has cocoa butter listed in the ingredients, okay? So if I'm reading and I see that it has sugar and it has soy lecithin and it has I can't think.
Palm kernel oil.
Palm, thank you. I was trying to think of what. Yes, palm. I was trying to think cottonseed. Yes, palm kernel oil. And nowhere in that label do I see cocoa butter. What have I got? Compound chocolate. Okay. So if there's no cocoa butter in it, it's a trade-off. Okay. It doesn't have to be tempered, but on the other hand, it doesn't have that same. Yeah, you sacrifice flavor for that convenience. Okay. And so both products have a purpose, and both products have, their applications. All right. Okay, so I've got my chocolate melted. I'm going to use the seeding method. Okay. What do I do? Do I dump all this in here? Seed. So when we talk about seed, what are we talking about? We're talking about chocolate that is in temper. Adding that tempered chocolate into my melted portion. Okay. Some people will use these, Calais or coins or whatever you want to call them, straight from the bag. Some people will chop these up or process them in the food processor so that you have smaller pieces which melt more quickly and easily, but then you've got that mess in your food processor to clean up. And if you're doing a big batch, you know.
So is that compound?
No. This is real chocolate.
Okay.
This is
So you're
Couvreur.
just using this to add to the current one to cool it down?
Correct. Okay. Once upon a time when I was in culinary school, chocolate came in big, 22-pound blocks. And so we didn't have these. So we would have to chop chocolate. Or we would just cut off a big hunk of it, put that in, okay, and stir. So part of this whole thing then, the first step is heating it, right, and melting out all those undesired, all the crystals, okay, whether it's from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, melting all of them. And then the next step in the tempering process is bringing that temperature down. But there's one other step that has to happen at the same time as bringing that temperature down. And that second part of that equation is agitating, moving, stirring, okay? So it's not just the temperature drop, but we need to initiate that formation, that creation of our crystals, okay? And so that happens when we do both things in conjunction, okay? So we're cooling and we're moving it, okay? The general suggestion on how much seed you're going to need to bring this down, and do we know what temperature we're heading for? We're heading for about 85, okay? About 85. So you want to use about a third, right? If I'm tempering a pound of chocolate, I either want to take out about a third of it so that I can add that back in and have a pound when I'm finished, or I can melt a pound and then add a third of a pound as my seed, okay? Roughly. Now if my chocolate has started out at 140 degrees, guess what? It's going to take more seed, right, to bring it down. If my chocolate has started at 110 or 115 degrees, it may take a little less seed to bring it down. All right. So seeding is the less intimidating method of tempering. It's also the most time-consuming method of tempering. All right. Any issues that you've run into with seeding? Yes.
If we have a tempering machine,
Yeah.
you have a ton of chocolate in there.
Yeah.
You've got the temperature up, you're lowering it down. Before we dip, we're lowering the temperature and adding a whole bunch of more chocolate to seed it and help cool it down.
If you've got a tempering machine, it doesn't require seed.
Okay,
It may speed up the process, but it does not require it.
okay.
Okay, because the tempering machine, right, keeps things in motion,
Right.
and then it will heat and it will cool. So it will do all those
So
things.
can you keep adding chocolate in the back and having that incorporate as long as you keep it? Or do you have to re-temper it every time you add chocolate?
All right. So, will you ask me that question again
Okay.
in a couple minutes?
Okay.
When we talk about maintaining a temperature, okay? All right, jump up and down if I forget to, okay? All right, now I lost my train of thought, go figure.
Well, you
Um,
asked
well,
if
the
people
problem-
had.
Yeah, issues, yes.
And we've had issues where just not stirring it enough, and
Yeah.
when you go to use the chocolate, it doesn't set up.
Yeah, okay, good, right? And that's an example of those temperatures, right? We think, oh, as long as I get those temperatures, I'm golden. No, there's all this stuff that happens in conjunction, okay? So good point, yeah, stir, stir, stir. I saw another one, yeah.
The problem I have is that quantity, you know, like how much to add to the chocolate that I've melted. I don't get that right.
Yeah, it's tricky, huh?
It's tricky.
It's tricky. Any others? Issues? How about, yes,
I just had when it cooled down, it took like 45 minutes
okay.
to get it.
Yeah, it takes a
And
long
our arms
time,
were gonna fall off.
right? Right? Yeah, and so maybe, I mean, it's possible that maybe your chocolate was too hot to start or over, you know,
Or we didn't.
on
put
the hot,
enough.
or not enough, especially initially, right? Like if my chocolate is 120 degrees, I'm not shy at all about putting a generous part of that additional third, right? To really just get it melted, get that cooled down. And by the way, we haven't mentioned why the seeding method works. Because it works because, right, we are cooling and we are agitating, but we're also introducing chocolate that has the existing Form 5 crystal in it. And so as that goes into the chocolate and we stir and those crystals, really, some of them melt, but some of them stay intact. One second. So we're starting to create a colony of Form 5 crystals, all right? And in time, with that continued temperature drop and with that additional agitation, we're encouraging every other bit of cocoa butter to kind of play follow the leader. And so they'll copy that Form 5, okay? So that's why this method, or that's the science behind this method. Yes?
We have had where the chocolate is beautiful, shiny like yours in the bowl. We dip our centers into dry and they leave for immediately.
Okay, all right. So what may be happening there, now when you say sheen, okay, I think sometimes people expect that when you dip something that it's going to set with a high gloss, okay, and that only happens if your chocolate is set against something shiny. So that's why your molded chocolates will come out really shiny, all right? So when we say sheen, it's not a high gloss. So I don't know if that's what you're expecting or saying that you're not getting.
Something's going wrong, that's why we're here, of course, too.
But it also,
But it will get that dusty look
okay,
on it.
all right. So that can be from a variety of factors or a combination of factors, okay? So your temper might have just been slightly off, slightly, a degree, half a degree, okay? Your room may be slightly on the warm side. So even though you get your chocolate in good temper, if I dip a strawberry, right, suddenly I have here I have a big mass of chocolate, and it's going to maintain its temperature, you know, for quite a while. But if I suddenly take my strawberry and, you know, and maybe it's July, and, you know, even with my AC running, my house is still at 74 degrees, and guess what? 74 degrees is not a good temperature for that chocolate to set. So it might be that your environment is just a little more on the warm side. Chocolate loves about 65 degrees. Is like the ideal temperature.
But don't put it in the refrigerator.
You can go in the refrigerator for just a couple minutes, just to kind of initiate, you know, that firm setting, but don't leave it in there for a long time. Here and then.
So would you want to use like the strawberry from the refrigerator that's cold, or do you want to use room temperature?
Use room temperature strawberries, room temperature, and then store them at room temp. So do them close to the time that you're going to serve them. otherwise they'll start to sweat. And if you put them in the refrigerator for a long time, strawberries especially, have you done that before? Yeah, lots of sweat, lots of sweat.
That was my question.
Okay. Yes.
Center's room temperature as well, anything that you're gonna dip, anything you're gonna dip should be at room
Ideally
temperature.
room temperature, right? If I'm dipping maybe ganache balls, okay, if they've been in the refrigerator, it goes here. The cold makes the chocolate contract, and in that contraction, it's easy for that chocolate then to crack, and then you've got to re-dip them to cover the crack. And anyway, sometimes, you know what? Room temperature is best. I mean, sometimes you have to bend those rules a little bit because of time constraint, or you know, something didn't go quite right. But you know, as a general rule, room temp is best. Okay, one more thing that can happen when you're using the seeding method is that you overestimate how much seed to put in. You're trying to speed it up, and so you put a lot in. You look like you have a knowing smile on your face here.
I like to do that.
Well, yeah. So there comes a temperature, a point where the chocolate's not really melting anymore, and so it's easy to wind up with a bowl of melted chocolate full of chunks. Okay, right? And then you want to just, all right, go back to bed. If that happens, you know, I know people will try and strain it out, but as soon as you do that, you're going to cool it way down, and you're going to wind up with a mess stuck in your strainer. And yes.
Okay, so it seems if you're using the seeding method, if you did chop it in little teeny pieces or put it in your food processor, that would eliminate that problem and make it easier.
It can.
What are the drawbacks to doing that?
The drawbacks to doing that is it takes time and planning, and it makes a mess, and maybe you didn't do enough, and maybe it makes you overconfident in adding a bunch, and you could still wind up with unmelted
So, but
bits.
if you measured it like, okay,
Yeah.
I have 16 ounces of chocolate and I'm gonna put this many ounces of the, you know,
Mm-hmm.
powder, finely chopped, then you would be right.
Theoretically, yes. Right? But just because of all the variables, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how cold or warm your kitchen is. I don't know how vigorously you're
It's the
stirring.
laundry room.
Okay.
With the window open.
Okay, right? And so what I'm trying to, I don't know, what I hope you go home with today is more confidence in what you're doing, but also the understanding that depending on every little individual factor, right? What brand of chocolate is it, and how warm is it, and what temperature did I start at, and so on, right? If I wanted maybe to create a more foolproof method, I might blitz some in my food processor and have a block, so that I could melt that initial, you know, portion without any fear of unmelted bits, and then use that block to take it down the rest of the way, realizing that I am going to have to fish something out, but it's only going to be what remains of that block. Another thing that I do sometimes, okay, and it involves water, and so it can be scary. But sometimes if I'm within, you know, if I'm seeding, and if I'm so close, but I'm afraid if I put more in, right, I'm going to end up with lumps. And what is the problem with lumps? Why do we not want chunks or lumps in our bowl of tempered chocolate? It's going to continue to create crystals, which we want, but it's going to make it happen too fast. And so within a very brief period of time, that bowl of mostly melted chocolate with just a couple of lumps in it is going to be a thick, unworkable mess. Okay. Another thing you can do is, let's say, I do need to check the temp here. We're at about 97, 98. I really haven't added any more seed. And I probably want, at this point, I'm going to reheat this chocolate. You guys are cool if I reheat this chocolate? Because I also want to show you the table method, okay? And I have no idea what time it is. It's 10:40. Oh, man! Okay, so we're going to melt right here. Okay. Okay, what were we talking about? We were talking about, oh, another thing that I'll do sometimes that involves water. If my chocolate is maybe 1 degree too hot, 2 degrees, a couple degrees, I can either just wait, right? I can, there's so many outside the box thinking, you know, if you can think outside the box, is it important, you know, what's my objective? Is my objective cooling? Okay, there are other ways I can cool my chocolate. I can take hot chocolate out of one hot bowl and scrape it into a colder bowl. And that's going to drop your temperature by a few degrees. And maybe that's all it's going to take. Or maybe I'm going to get a bowl of cold water, not ice water, but cold water, and just dunk my hot chocolate, just to take it that 1 or 2 degrees extra quickly, without fear of, you know, winding up with chunks. So there's other ways to do it. You know who? I wish I could have been here yesterday. I caught part of, yesterday there was or I don't know what day, Thursday, Friday. Josh Johnson he's been all over. And he knows his stuff, and he's with the Guittard Chocolate Company. Years ago, I was teaching baking and pastry at a big school in New York City, and so we had lots of visiting, you know, guest chef instructors and stuff. And so at that time, Donald Russell was the corporate pastry chef at Guittard, and he came to our school, and he showed us a really out of the box method. He said he would sometimes put his heated chocolate on his KitchenAid with the paddle attachment on the lowest setting. Was that chocolate going to cool? Absolutely. Was it going to cool fast? No. Did he need it to cool fast? No. Was it being agitated? Yep. So guess what? As long as he kept the speed low so that he was not incorporating air bubbles into that chocolate, very different method, okay? A little bit scary, but it worked. Yeah.
Okay, you may address this, but when you're dipping and you want to keep it at a temperature, we also have a problem, it cools down
Yeah.
fairly quickly,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you have to bring it back up to temperature a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, what was your question that you were supposed to remember? I'm not going to forget your question. You were going to ask me that same question.
The tempering machine.
Oh, the tempering machine. Okay. Okay. So this is going to answer both of your questions. You do have to then, right, when we bring it down, we created the crystals, but we're so cold that we're on the verge of setting, okay? And so could we work with the chocolate, you know, without bringing it up? For a couple of minutes, but then it's going to start to solidify. So we do have to bring it up, okay? And you do need to keep it within that narrow temperature window of about 87 to 91 degrees for your dark chocolate. But yes, right, if I'm making nut bark, I don't have to worry about it because I throw my nuts in, stir it up, spread it out, and let it set, bam. But if I'm dipping, right, every time I put something into that chocolate, it's cooler than the chocolate, and it's going to start to cool the chocolate down. Also, my room, right, may cool it down. If I put my chocolate on a cold surface, it's going to cool it down. So I want to insulate with something, a cutting board, a towel, a heating pad, okay? You can reheat that chocolate with a heat gun, like you go buy a Black & Decker, you know, at Home Depot. Just have somewhere safe to set it down so that you're not going to burn your, you know, anything or, you know, drop it on the floor. You can. So this lady over here is wondering about her tempering machine. Can she replenish chocolate without retempering the whole thing? And the answer is yes. So one method, another method, is to keep a quantity of melted chocolate over here. Start with this. Okay, don't start with this. That's too scary. Start with this. Have some hot over here. What does hot mean? At least 100 degrees, maybe up to 120. Okay. You know what? Let me rephrase that. Keep it hot. Keep it hot, okay? But, and then use some of that hot melted chocolate to warm up your colder chocolate. That way you're replenishing, you're rewarming, okay?
So we don't have to reseed it.
And you do not have to reseed it because it will follow the leader once it gets in here. Because those Form 5 crystals are bullies, okay? They'll make the new guy fall in line, okay? Yeah.
My dad used to always just keep a hairdryer.
Yeah,
that was
yeah, yeah.
special.
Sure, a hairdryer too. Now, a hairdryer works too. A hairdryer maybe is gonna, whoosh, you know, have more blowing, where the heat gun is powerful heat, but less wind. So, but yes, they both absolutely work. One other way, right? You could do what I'm doing here. You could put it over some simmering water. Stir, stir, stir. Take it off. Take the temperature. Okay, and do that as required. You can also, I'm a rebel, and sometimes I'll go, guess what? because it's faster, I'll just go right over the flame. That fast, okay? And off, okay? Okay. So there's different ways to do it. Yes?
With the tempering machine though, can I add just the seeded chocolate, or since it's gonna keep the heat better? Or does it need to be the melted at like 100 to 120?
No, but if you want to replenish without retempering,
It needs to be melted.
yeah, it needs to be melted. Okay. Otherwise, it'll drop your temperature too much, and it won't melt, and you'll wind up with a really thick, sticky, nasty mess. Okay, so real quick, we're gonna quick show. Has anybody ever done the table method of tempering? It's okay. Here we go. We're gonna do it right here, right now.
Rebecca.
Yeah. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes, and I'm at 114 degrees, so we're good to go. I want to pour out, and you know what? If you guys fall in love with this method, guess who sells a nice marble slab for you to use? Oh, it's Gigi. Okay, just because I feel like I might need a little bit more space because I'm hurrying, I'm going to go right here in my granite, okay? And I'm going to pour about 2/3 of this chocolate out onto my counter. And before I proceed, I'm going to try and scrape down the sides of my bowl as best I can. And I'm going to set this bowl onto my insulated towel here. I'm going to take an offset spatula, the same kind that you'd use for icing a cake. And then I have a triangle spatula, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to agitate this chocolate. I'm going to work it back and forth on this surface. And the reason that marble and granite work well for this is because of their, I don't know, thermodynamic mass. Okay, so it's able to pull some of that heat out in a very efficient fashion.
My mommy brain hates this.
Oh, really?
The cleanup.
Well, yeah, I know. But I'll tell you an easy way to clean it, okay? Do you have a blowtorch? We're pulling out all the stops today. Okay, so as I spread this out, right, that's the agitation and that's the cooling, okay? But what I have to watch out for is these outer edges, because that's where it's going to be the most cool, and if I'm not careful and it stays out there too long, those outer edges will start to solidify, okay? And I don't want that. But I do want to create, a really uniform temperature here. So I'm going to just repeat that a couple of times. Always scraping back into the center. And the goal here, oh, beautiful. Now I actually could, you know what? I could, maybe we're going to take this temperature, just, oh, this turns on as I open it. There we go.
You have to lock it all the way in.
All the way, there we go. It's a little fancier than my own thermometer. Okay, we're just gonna take this temp quick. And you know what? It's 80 degrees, 81, 70, and I'm about 80 degrees here, okay? Is that good? Is that bad? That's really good. It's cold, right? But that's good because I've definitely, I've gone a little bit lower than maybe my target point. But that's just fine. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to scrape it back into my original bowl. And this is a little thick. Like I said, this is a little thick for me for a couverture. So now, some of these little bits left behind are solidifying a little bit. So I'm not going to put those in there. And now I'm going to stir, stir, stir. And ideally, if I've done this right, and if the kitchen gods are smiling on me today, adding that cold chocolate from the granite into that portion that was still warm, that's going to be my reheating, okay? Because you do have to reheat, right? Because if we're down at that lower end of that temperature range, we don't have long to work before that chocolate starts to solidify, okay? So we're going to take the temp again, and I'm so happy. We're at 87, 88 degrees. Is that good? Yeah. That's good, right? That's right where I want to be. That's within that little window, right, of 87 to 91. Yay! Go me! Okay, so now I've done all the things, right? I did the hot, I did the cool, I did the agitate. Am I ready to go? yeah, maybe. How do I know for sure? You know what? The last thing I want to do is start to dip truffles. And I get 50 of them done, and I go, oh, that's not setting so nicely. Right? That's the last thing I want to do. So before I start to work with this, I want to test it. I want to do a quick test. Believe me, it's worth it. You can test this on a little edge of your spatula. You can test it with a piece of parchment paper. You can have a new spatula. And what I do is I just put a thin coat. Okay, dip it in, scrape almost all of it off, and then wait. And that's the hard part, okay? And what am I waiting for? I'm waiting to see what happens, right? I'm waiting to see how it sets. All right?
Did you put it in the fridge?
I'm going to create a false, I may get a false reading because it'll force it, okay? What do I want to see? Or did you have another question?
No.
Part 2? Okay. Okay. I want to see that this sets at more or less a uniform pattern, at a uniform rate. Where I don't see, here's the danger, here's the dangerous thing, right? If I look at this and I see that, ooh, it's got a streak down the middle. It's kind of setting on one side, but maybe it's a little kind of streaky here and a kind of streaky on the edge. That's not a great sign, okay? That means maybe I'm close, but maybe it's not, okay. Hi. If I show you guys this on the front, oh, somebody want to come and just look at that in the light. It's more or less uniform in the way it's setting, okay? It's not going to look super shiny, but it should have a sort of a sheen to it. No striping, no wet spots, set spots, okay? And that means that I am good to go, okay? Yeah. Okay? But then as I work, the next thing that I have to really pay attention to as I work, the temperature is dropping. It is dropping, okay? So you maybe, if I'm doing strawberries or truffles, I maybe have to, you know, make myself, okay, after every row, or after every 5 truffles, or after every 7 strawberries, I'm going to just reheat it, or at least I'm going to stop, and I'm going to stir, and I'm going to monitor that temperature, okay? Don't let yourself drop too low, because then you're in more of a danger of, oh, I'm too cold, so I've got to, and then you'll overshoot, and then you'll right? What happens if I'm in temper and I'm reheating? My max temp is what? 91, okay? What happens if I hit 92? You might be okay, depending on how much you have in here, because it's not an instantaneous thing, okay? You're not going to melt out every single Form 5 crystal, right? Instantaneously. You melt out a few. You might be okay, just letting it wait and stirring. Bring it back down, test it again. You may well be okay. But if I shoot up to 95, guess what? It's not in temper anymore. What do I do? After I cry a few tears. I just start over. I use the same chocolate. It's still perfectly usable, good, you know, chocolate. But you do have to start over and repeat from step 1. Okay. So, yeah.
If it's streaky, does that mean your chocolate was too hot or too cold, or?
Any of the above.
Any.
Or just not properly crystallized. Okay.
So it's not.
If you feel like, oh, it's not, you know, it doesn't look quite right, and you think, well, maybe I didn't stir it enough. Don't give up yet, okay? Don't give up yet. Resuscitate, right? Try every last measure you can to resuscitate that. So maybe all it is a little more stirring, okay? Not good vigorous stirring for, you know, half a minute. Or just let that temperature drop another half a degree or a degree, and try it again, okay? Yeah.
Okay, so just want to repeat what you said so I understand. You're using it, you're dipping in your stuff, and it's cooling down, so you would put it on the heat back up to that range, that 80,
Yep, in that little window.
And then you can keep going. You don't have to do anything else unless you go above that.
That is correct, right?
Okay.
And then we know there's different ways to reheat, right? The heat gun, the stove, the water bath, you know, the actual flame, the bowl of hot chocolate that's over here that you're going to ladle in, all right? So different ways to reheat. Yeah. Yeah, just hold it above, or you know what? I'll do it all over. I'll do it above, and I'll do it on the outside, because I can reach, you right? So I can get at least 3, you know, the top and the sides. And if it's really bad, I'll go on the bottom too. All right, so keep those rules in mind, right? But realize that it's more than just temperature, right? It's the agitation that has to happen in conjunction. And then keep in mind that, you may even find, I don't know, if you have a bread proofing box, you know what? That could work, right? For melting it maybe. Or, think outside the box, because maybe you have a way that's gonna be ideal for you. You, and then I think we have to wrap it up.
So just so I can make sure I'm getting this, if the temperature is in like that special range, you don't need to be stirring it, but if it's above that, you need to be stirring it, is that like? Is that a good?
Okay. Wow. We'll say yes. Okay. The short answer is yes.
Okay.
Right? If you're not in the range, stir.
Okay.
If you're in the range and you stir too much, there is something that can happen. You're actually, helping to facilitate more crystals, all right, and it may thicken. If you're stirring a lot, you may be actually forcing more crystals sooner than you want, and your mix might get really thick, and that's something that happens. Anybody ever experienced that? Your mixture gets really thick, but it's within that temperature range. Ever happened to anybody? It will at some point, and that's just because you've created so many of those nice crystals that now they just want to set, okay? And so at that point, it actually is okay to go slightly above that 91 degrees, all right? Because you need to remelt some of those crystals to get that mixture back into a fluid state, okay? And then you had a question?
Did you say what to do if you have too many chunks, if it gets too cool and it's
Oh,
chunky?
we started, right? We said some people are tempted to strain it, right? But then you end up in a mess because you put it through a cold strainer and it's exposed to cold air and it's a mess. Some people try and fish them out. If there's only a few, maybe you can just put on a glove and pull them out. You can also try really carefully to remelt them, okay? Like with a heat gun or over a flame. But staying within that window, right? Don't go above 91 degrees. So it takes a while, but it can be done, okay? Melt a little bit, stir a little bit, take the temp so that you know how far you can go. Melt a little bit, stir a little bit, melt a little bit, stir a little bit, okay? So anyway, hope you go home with a little bit more, confidence in your ability to tackle this, a little bit more understanding of, all the pieces that are involved. And thank you so much for coming today. It's been a pleasure.
If you'd like to try the Guitar Crunch Vanilla that Rebecca was using, we do have samples here that you're welcome to grab on your way out.
Cool. And then I'm just going to set these two spatulas over near those as you go by. If you want to just take a look under the light to see how these did set, to kind of see what you're looking for. Oh, and then the cleanup here, somebody said your mommy heart hurts because of the cleanup. You can use a blowtorch to melt it, wet towel, wipe it away, use a heat gun, melt it, just wipe it away, because then you got a laundry problem.
Hair dryer.
Hair dryer, yeah, hair dryer.